If you're a Housewives fan, then you've probably watched The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. And if you haven't, that's why I'm here, because I'm going to fill you in on one of the show's most captivating and polarizing cast members, which was Jen Shah, who was arrested on camera back in 2021 as she was filming season 2. Now, Jen was arrested on federal charges for money laundering and running a telemarketing scheme. Now, I've got official court documents, and we're going to take a deep dive into the case and as to exactly what she did as she faces her sentencing in less than 2 weeks. Welcome back to Damien After Dark. If you're new here or you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button right below this video. Also, make sure you hit the thumbs up button and give us a like, because that will help share this video throughout the YouTube community. And last but not least, join the conversation, because I would love to hear from you. Leave your thoughts and opinions on this story, because this is a really, really important one, especially if you're a Housewives of Salt Lake City fan. Now, let me start by saying this. I really liked Salt Lake City Housewives. I really do. And Jen Shah was one of my favorites. She really was. When it comes to these reality shows, I always like the villain, or not even so much the villain, but the person who's like the centerpiece of the show. The Nene of Atlanta, the Teresa of Jersey, the Kyle or Lisa Vanderpump of, Beverly Hills. I almost said Las Vegas. Anyway, Jen was that of Salt Lake City. She was kind of the centerpiece of the show. All the girls rallied around her. She kind of led the pack. And, you know, you get it. She was just a polarizing figure, and you either loved her or hated her. But when I saw her to be arrested, you know, it didn't really change how I felt about Jen, because, of course, in this country, you're innocent until proven guilty. And often on social media, you know, I would give her words of encouragement. We would talk a little bit here back and forth. She's always engaged with fans. But then a few weeks ago, I saw where an Instagram page, there was a fan page for the show, and they had talked about there being official court documents from the defense with their sentencing recommendation, as well as a breakdown of the investigation. So pretty much the defense released these documents, or they were public knowledge, I guess, that pretty much tells the courts, hey, this is what we think Jen Shah should be sentenced to in prison, and this is why. And they break down everything that Jen has, I don't even want to say allegedly anymore, because she's been charged, and she's actually said that she was guilty of these crimes. So is it really alleged anymore? I don't think so. But anyway, something in me told me, Self, you need to look at those documents. Because listen, like I said, I've always tried to give Jen the benefit of the doubt, right? I've always tried to think innocent until proven guilty. However, the feds don't usually come for you unless they've built a solid case and they've got evidence against you to convict you. So I knew that when there was smoke, there was some fire here with Jen. You know, in the past, when she's explained what she did for a living, she didn't really make a lot of sense. She would say that she was the man behind the curtain who sent you ads that you didn't know about and made the algorithm pop when you were online. It just really didn't make a lot of sense. I kind of could see where she was coming from, but at the same time, you know, it was very questionable. She lived a very lavish lifestyle. If you remember on season 1, she threw a party for Meredith Marks that was $85,000. I mean, who just goes and spends $85,000 on a party for a friend? Unless you're Bill Gates or Elon Musk or somebody that's balling like that. But Jen Shah from Salt Lake City, I don't know, no shade. But anyway, shout out to Housewives of SLC on Instagram. I want to give them their credit because they sent me this document from attorney Ronald Richards. He has the official document. He posted it online. Housewives of Salt Lake City, they sent it to me. And baby, when I tell y'all, I was shocked at the things that Miss Thang was doing, Miss Shah had going on. I was shocked at the levels, y'all, that Jen went to defraud, lie, and dodge the government, evade taxes. I mean, the list goes on. And she's been doing this for years. She's gotten tipped off before that, you know, People are watching you, and she continued to do this type of illegal criminal activity. Now, I'm going to place the link in the description if you want to read the entire 22-page sentencing position. Now, I read all 22 pages. It's going to take you a good hour to probably read through it, because I wanted to read it slow and really dissect everything and make sure I bring y'all as much information that I can from this. So the sentencing position, I've already told y'all what that is. Pretty much the document saying the appropriate amount of time that Jen should receive behind bars. Now, the prosecution is asking for 120 months. That's 10 years. But Jen's team is asking for 3 years and probation. Okay? Now, after everything that I read, I would have to say that 3 years is probably a little too lenient for what she did. Only because she hurt elderly people. Now, when you think about the Chrisley's case, Todd and Julie Chrisley, they got sentenced to 7 and 11 years each. Julie got 7 years, Todd got 11, and they weren't defrauding elderly people. They were just defrauding the government and banks, right? And to me, it's really not the same, because they're both bad. Don't get me wrong. You don't want to get caught up in either. But the government and banks, you know, they're insured, even though a lot of the banks that they were under went under bankruptcy. But, you know, it's not as heart-wrenching. It doesn't pull at your heart as much when you find out that it's elderly people like Jen. So for Jen to say she only deserves 3 years in prison when she had actual victims who went through a lot of trauma and stress, which we'll get into because we have victim impact statements. Yes, in this 22-page document, there are about 6 or 7 impact statements from victims who gave their testimony on what Jen did to them and how it left their lives afterwards. Now, one of the first sentences in the opening of the document stated, quote, "For nearly a decade, the defendant, Jennifer Shah, was an integral leader of a wide-ranging, nationwide telemarketing fraud scheme that victimized thousands of people." So that's very important. And let's look at that, because from the beginning of this whole thing coming out, people have suspected, we've heard rumors through the grapevine that Jen was the ringleader, but this document is confirming that there were different tiers of people in this scheme. You know, there were people at the bottom, you know, who didn't really have a lot of knowledge what were going on, but they knew they were doing something that wasn't too legal. And then you would go up to different tiers of people with how much involvement they had in this scheme. And Jen was at the very tippy-tip top. Like, she was the Cruella de Vil of the situation in her fancy luxury outfits, smoking her Newport 100s that are the longest, sitting back at the boardroom with her heels kicked back on her desk. I just can see it now. Scamming the hell out of people, okay? Now, it also says that she victimized thousands of innocent people, many of them elderly. But I also, when I was thinking about this, I believe that it was probably more than what the government thinks, because if you think about the people who came forward, the people that they were able to estimate were scammed, everybody probably didn't come forward. A lot of these people were embarrassed, humiliated. Some of them are probably not even living anymore. You know, I'm sure, because these were elderly people she was scamming, and this is going back 10 years ago. So some of them could potentially not even be living to tell their stories. So I don't think that there's just thousands of people. I think that she could have potentially had hundreds of thousands of people that she could have defrauded and schemed and scammed over the 10-year period that it was that she started doing this. Because she started back in 2012 and it ended, she was doing it all the way up until 2020. So during the pandemic, she would think about it. People in the pandemic were suffering and she was still doing this until she was, actually, I take that back. She was doing it all the way up until 2021 when she was arrested. She was arrested in March of 2021. So she was running this scheme and scam all the way up until then. Doing this, keep in mind, she started filming and auditioning for the show, preparation for season 1 of Salt Lake City, back in like 2018, 2019. So you went on TV knowing what you were doing. Did you not see what happened to Teresa? Like, did you not in any way, and my thing was, did nobody in her camp, her assistant steward, anybody that knew what she was what she was doing, did nobody ever come to her and say, hey, Jen, you haven't signed on to that show yet, right? Because I just don't think it would be a good idea. It's going to put a spotlight directly on you. However, the feds were already watching her to begin with. I don't think the show would have changed the fact that she was being investigated upon. I think it just kind of shined a light on what she was doing to a more visible extent. However, the feds, this has been like an ongoing investigation from the FBI for years. Now, what's even worse is that the document continues to say, many of the elderly, vulnerable people suffered significant financial hardship and damage at the defendant's direction and was defrauded over and over again until nothing was left. So she was literally running these people's cards monthly, weekly, daily, until they had no more credit left, until their bank accounts were empty, until their credit limits had been reached, and they had no money left. Now, some of you may say, well, why would somebody give her all their money like that? But you got to think about it. These were elderly people who were susceptible to this kind of scheme, for one. You know, a lot of elderly people, they oftentimes can be easily swindled, especially if you get someone over the phone who is very manipulative and can talk somebody out their drawers. I don't know. Some people, y'all know how it is. Some people can be very manipulative, and you can get somebody to damn near do anything, especially someone that's in their 70s. And a lot of these people that we later come to find out that she even threatened, her and her team threatened and said, if you don't run this final charge on your card, you know, this could mean X, Y, and Z, and scare them into giving their card information. And also, a lot of these elderly people, when they realized they were being scammed, they had put so much money into these fake businesses that Jen was promising that they felt like, okay, I've come this far. I've donated this much. Maybe if I just give them the last $5,000 that they're asking, the business that I've got will finally, you know, something will start happening. Because what they were doing were selling false business opportunities, pretty much saying, hey, we can help you run a business from home, but first we need $500 to set up your website. You send them the $500. Okay, well, now we need another $500 to help you get and acquire customers through our social media. Okay, let me send them $500. Okay, well, now we need inventory so we can have inventory on stock. And they just keep sending in hopes to get a return, and it never happened. Now, I instantly thought of my grandmother when it came to this, which is why it's so sad. And I had to finally look at Jen Shah like, yeah, you kind of are low down and a piece of shit for what you did. And I hate to say that, but I thought of my grandmother because my grandmother, you know, she calls me when she thinks she's got a charge on her bank account that she doesn't know where it's coming from. You know, she calls me about little things like that she's not as privy to as a 29-year-old like myself, where we're hip with mobile banking and, you know, computers and electronics. Someone who is 70 or 80, they didn't grow up in that era, so they're not as savvy. So I thought about, like, this could have been my grandmother that she defrauded and took every dollar that she had to live off of. It could have been your grandmother at home. You know, well, it really could have been mine because thankfully, I would have caught on to that shit probably. Because like I said, my grandmother calls me about things like that. Hopefully, you know, check if you have lucky enough to have your grandparent living, or maybe it's your mother or father that's older or elderly. Check up with them. So be like, hey, Mom, you need to look at your bank statements. See if you see anything that's funny. Is anybody calling you and trying to sell you anything? Now, for all these years that Jen did this, she had a few different companies that she was operating under. So she would set up a company, and then when it would be flagged by the FTC for doing, you know, unethical practices, she would go open up another company. Sometimes it would open things up overseas, different bank accounts overseas. At one point, she put a bank account in her aunt's name, her aunt that we've seen on the show. She put a bank account in her name. All these times trying to dodge these different red flags that the FTC was getting. Anytime that she would suspect that someone was on to her, she would duck and dodge and do little things, which we also saw in the RHOSLC case. They did similar when they transferred, they transferred all their money into Nanny Faye's bank account. If you remember Nanny Faye on RHOSLC Knows Best, they were doing similar practices, this RHOSLC's and Jen. Unbeknownst to the family member now, I'm about, like, the documents don't say this, but I really don't think that Jen's family or her aunt knew what Jen had going on. And Jen probably sold her aunt a lie. Hey, can you open this bank account for me? I'll give you X amount of dollars for helping me out. But it would have been a red flag for me. I'm not opening up a bank account in nobody's name. You hear me? Nobody. It just sounds shady. It just sounds shady. Or I'm not opening up a bank account for you in my name. Now, I need my water. So the court details text messages throughout the years between Jen, her assistant Stuart, and other employees. Y'all remember Stuart? He was on the show. He was Jen's right-hand man. He was always there with her. So there were some text messages that the prosecution included in these documents so the judge could see just the way that Jen kind of spoke to people, the way she kind of ran her scam, and text to other people that was working for her, directing them in the scheme. And at one point, she sent a group text out to her employees. Now, get this. She sent a group text out to her employees, praising them for a scheme that they did where they had made $15,000 in one day off of fewer than 7 victims. So they came into work on a Monday morning, defrauded and defrauded and defrauded, and made $15,000 in one day with calling less than 7 people. And Jen sent out a text and read, "I hope this means we are on record for a good week." So she was pumped up. Hey, scheme, get the money, rob the people. And the court has these text messages. The court had everything, not only her text messages, they had everything that she had Googled. If that don't tell you what the government can really get from you when it's time to get from you, if they need to get from you, they can get what you Google searching. They can get your text messages, your photos, your videos, anything you do on that iPhone, they're going to see. Unless it's in one of those encrypted messaging apps like Telegram or WhatsApp. They also pointed out in this document that Jen was using those encrypted apps to communicate with some people. Now, one thing I noticed, and I knew was going to come back to bite her in the ass, was her post-arrest behavior, her behavior that she had after she was arrested. In this document, they have an entire section dedicated to her post-arrest behavior. And if you watched Housewives of Salt Lake City and you watched her social media, you'll know that Jen's behavior since being arrested has been anything but what someone that's being arrested should do. Let's just say that. We've seen her shove people on TV. We've seen her toss wine on someone's head, take somebody's shoes, and expensive shoes, and throw them into the ocean, littering into the ocean in San Diego. We've seen her lie. We've seen her over and over again, time and time again, say she's innocent up until the 11th hour, as the document states. In the 11th hour, she decides to say, okay, I'll take a plea deal. I'm guilty. Now, one of the things they noted was that Jen sold Justice for Jen merchandise. And I think that has a lot to do with her narcissistic behavior. And I'm not even being shady, because narcissistic personalities, they love to make it about them no matter what. No matter that Jen has been charged with this and she knows what she did and that she's hurt so many people. And instead of saying, you know what, I fucked up, I'm a terrible human being, I want to take accountability, I want to pay these people back. And instead of doing that, she capitalized off of being on this show and having a fan base behind her. and having people, including myself, I'm guilty of, rallying behind her and supporting her and saying, you know, hope things get better for you, praying for you and your family. Justice for Jen, justice for Jen. I never said that, but some people did. And she made these Justice for Jen merchandise. And they noted this in the document. They mentioned her living an extravagant lifestyle at the expense of victims, including the infamous $7 million Shawski chalet that she rented out to be on the show. If y'all remember on season 1, she had that huge 8-bedroom home in Park City, Utah, that she pretty much allegedly rented out just to be on the show to say she had this big extravagant life, when at the end of the day, it was all a lie. As well as they mentioned her designer labels and brands, purses and shoes that recently that we learned is fake. A lot of the bags that Jen had were knockoffs, and they tried to take a lot of her designer goods and auction them off to try and pay back some of these victims from the scheme. So they tried to auction off some of her stuff, and when they did that, they realized that, oh, most of these bags are fake from China. So she was living like this ultimate lie of a life. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with her owning fake bags, because in my opinion, sometimes it could be a waste of money just to be spending so much money on this designer stuff. And hey, if you want to do fake bags, do fake bags. At the end of the day, a lot of times people aren't going to be able to tell from the naked eye anyway. And 2, you're saving you some money in the end. To me, it's a smart purchase. Unless you're buying real bags for the investment, because some bags are literally investments, like Birkin bags. You can take them, you can resell them later, those types of things. But as I said earlier, they bring up in the document that Jen has publicly denied these charges from the get-go. I mean, to the point that I was literally almost believing this woman, giving her the benefit of the doubt. But like I said, most of the time when the feds come, they got something on you. They have to, or they don't come after you. They have like a 98% conviction rate. Now, another thing included in the documents is the victim impact statements. Up until now, we've not really heard from any of Jen's victims. Unlike in the Girardi case with Tom Girardi, from Erica's husband from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, he had many victims who came forward and spoke what had happened to them. Burn victims, plane crash victims who had their parents were in these plane crashes and they were supposed to get money from it. We heard from a lot of victims in that case and the damage that it did. But when it came to Jen's, we never really heard anything. But they have 6 victim impact statements. And we'll try to go through a few of them. I've got all 6 of them. So victim number 1 is a widow from California in her 70s. And she explains that the, quote, mental anguish is still with me today. And the guilt I harbor from being so vulnerable and easy prey to such sharks still swims in my mind. She asked that the punishment fits the crime. Jen was directly involved with this victim, and when the victim couldn't afford the bogus services on one card, Jen had her salesperson spread it out amongst multiple cards. The salesperson texts Jen saying, "She's laughing and excited, and I think she's in love with me." In which Jen responded, "If she's in love with you, then you better make sure she loves you for at least 16 weeks so she doesn't charge back, LOL. Close this victim, or close this lady. Solid. Send a selfie. Whatever you need to do so she stays in love with you." The victim eventually attempted to charge back, in which Jen tried to offer the woman a partial refund in exchange for her not to charge back. Victim number 2, also in her 70s from North Carolina, says that Jen and her company defrauded her out of $40,000, half of her life savings. She says each person scammed has their own story with a dream of a better retirement and a better life, in which was taken away when they were coerced to give their money for false promises. Victim number 4 explains that she lost over $100,000 due to her victimization by the business opportunity scheme. She describes the terrible emotional, mental, physical, and financial anguish that she has suffered. Due to the financial devastation visited upon her by the defendant and her co-conspirators, quote, "It's an everyday struggle and an everyday worry, wondering where I'm going to get the money for the next set of bills that needs to be paid, and the food and shelter needed to survive, as well as providing care for my critically ill husband and a 90-year-old father who is critically ill. Both need me to help to provide for them financially." Victim number 4 addresses the defendant directly by saying, "The burden you have caused me is overwhelming. I can't even really put into words the amount of anguish you have caused." So she really hurt a lot of people. And I don't think she realized that a lot of these people had family members who were relying on them, grandchildren that were living with them. You know, this one woman said she had a critically ill husband and her father was really ill, and they were both living with her, depending on her, and you sucked their bank accounts down to nothing. Victim number 5 was defrauded for $30,000 and says that they ultimately became homeless and has developed trust issues as a cause of this. I bet. Some people became homeless, Jen, while you were living off these people's money in this huge rented mansion with your fake purses and shit. These people could barely get by and pay their fucking rent. And that's why I think Jen deserves a little longer than 3 years in prison. Yes, she may get 10. She may get 10. And a lot of people have been commenting on stuff like this and saying, "Oh, well, she'll do 3 years and get out on good behavior." It don't work like that. When the federal government comes after you, you do 85% of your time day for day. No good time. So she's going to be in there for a while, unless they just give her a lenient sentence, which I doubt is going to happen, because whoever wrote this document and broke everything down, I mean, they broke it down. They broke it down. All the way down. And they, at one point, let me find that. So, Jen's attorneys, they had to write up a reason why Jen should only get 3 years in probation, right? The same way these people wrote up, the prosecution wrote up why she should get 10 years. Her defense had to come up with a defense as to why she should get 3. And they put in there, you know, of course, about her family and these sorts of things. And the prosecution, they stated, quote, "To be sure, the defendant's family may find it difficult during the defendant's incarceration, as it is true of the family members of anyone who is incarcerated. But the defendant engaged in brazen criminal conduct for nearly a decade, each day knowing that she was putting her liberty at risk and that it would hurt those closest to her if she were caught. The harm the defendant has caused to her own family through her choices and her actions should not ensure to her benefit as sentencing, especially when balanced against the horrific outcomes for the victims of her conduct. In addition, unlike any of the others, the defendant has a spouse who made a very good living. She has no need to commit the crime to support herself or her family. She did so out of pure greed." Now, allegedly, Coach makes upwards of $600,000, over $600,000 a year. Let's not forget he has a law degree. I don't know if he's practicing, but he also was an assistant coach at some school, and he was always traveling. So they were never really hurting for money. I think Jen was just sitting at home, didn't want to be Betty Crocker, homemaker, stay home with the kids. She wanted to be an equal to her husband and be balling and making money. So she went out here and decided to start this scheme. I don't think she intentionally went into it thinking I'm going to start scheming people. I think she had a career in marketing for years, and she started seeing the different loopholes and things that she could possibly do to make money illegally on the side, and then she got wrapped up in it, or someone introduced her into doing that, and then she just kind of took over and started her own thing. Because she said she used to work for a marketing company, and then she eventually left because she wasn't being treated equal as a woman in the boardroom. Now, they were, there were around 30 people that were involved with this scheme, and about 2/3 of them have already been sentenced. Had Jen admitted this from the get-go, like a lot of these other people did, you know, she would have probably gotten a lesser sentence. But it's the fact that she waited to the very, very end to make a plea deal and has said that she's guilty over and over again, screaming it from the rooftops and on public television for everyone to see, national television. She may be getting the highest sentence they could give her because she waited so long, and she's kept this lie up for so long. The prosecution states towards the end of the document that Jen deserves 120 months in prison because nothing deterred, quote, nothing deterred the defendant from continuing to commit the fraud. She was not deterred when the FTC shut down her sales floor. She was not deterred when her co-conspirators were arrested. She was not deterred when her co-conspirators were jailed, when they went to trial, when they pled guilty, and when they were convicted or when they were sentenced. So many different things were happening. And they saw in Jen's Google searches where she was Googling her co-conspirators' cases and keeping up with their cases and their trials and seeing when they were, you know, are they going to jail? Did they get sentenced? Are they going to mention my name? They saw where she was tracking this the entire time, and never one time did she say, fuck, you know, the trail's getting hot on me. I need to let me just fucking stop what I'm doing. She never even stopped. I was going to say she could have at least said, you know what, okay, let me just say, hey, I'm guilty. So it's from 2021 up until now, almost 2023, she's been saying she's innocent damn near the whole time. Also, remember over the last couple seasons, since we learned she was arrested, we also learned, you know, that Stewart, her own assistant, was going to testify against her. And Jen was still proclaiming her innocence up until she realized, and I think her attorneys told her, look, sweetheart, there's nothing else that we can do. They have too much evidence against you, and your right-hand man is testifying against you. And that's just going to take you down right there. Stewart is the #1 witness in her case that would have slit her throat and sealed her fate. And that's why Jen ultimately said, you know what, let me take a plea deal. But you waited till the end, Jen. Did you really think you were going to beat the government? Did you really? I could have seen had Jen had like an unlimited, like had she had access to so much money, she, you know, she could was able to pay for the best of the attorneys, but she couldn't. Remember, she tried to take her mother's retirement. Her mother had $1 million in retirement, and she asked her mother to put that up for her attorneys. Her son's in medical school, all this money being wasted because you wanted to keep up with the Joneses and live some fucking extravagant lifestyle. Now, they said in the document, the defendant is hardly someone who has demonstrated that she has suddenly turned over a new leaf after nearly a decade of crime. I said, ooh, the shade. Let me read that again. They said, the defendant is hardly someone who has demonstrated that she has suddenly turned over a new leaf after a decade of crime. They're pretty much trying to state their case as to why she should get more than 3 years. And they're saying, look, this lady has not changed since she was arrested. She's been doing this for a decade. What makes you think she's going to turn over a new leaf and change in a year and a half? She's not. That's why we think she needs to go to prison for a quite lengthy amount of time so she can think about what she's done and what she did to harm these elderly people. I guess the ultimate question to wrap this up that I have for Jen is why? You know, why? Coach Shah made great money. Like, why did you have to do this? Did you never once think about your kids? Because when you started doing this, your kids were like, what, 8, 9, 10, 11 at the time? Young children. You not to think that I could possibly miss out on their future? Them going to school, them getting married, them having children. That's what I would have been thinking about. But you worried about a Gucci bag and a fucking Tesla. I have a strong feeling that Jen is going to be sentenced to the 120-month sentence based off of the other people that was arrested with her. The people that were arrested underneath Jen that was involved with this, who have came forward in the last 2 years and pled guilty and all that, they, when it came to their sentencing guideline, they got, you know, they got the sentence that was on up there. If their sentencing guidelines said they should be sentenced to 3 to 5 years in prison, these people were getting the 5 years. They were getting the max that they could get. So I see that Jen's probably going to ultimately end up doing the 120-month sentence, 10 years. And listen, I think this is the last we'll see of Jen Shah. I don't think this is going to be a Teresa situation. Teresa had an advantage to hers because she was in there for a year. And Bravo was interested in her, and they wanted to see what she was going to do when she came out of prison. And because she wasn't like directly involved in her husband's frauding and scheming, I think that's why they kept Teresa around. Because a lot of people say, well, why are they distancing themselves from Jen, but they didn't Teresa? Jen was directly impacting people. Teresa was just dumb and signing excuse me, Teresa, but she was just, you know, not ignorant, not knowing any better, doing what her husband said, and she got caught up in it. Honestly believe that. Even when she was spending cash for furniture and shit, I don't think it dawned on her that, you know, she's probably just thinking, my husband's got a lot of money. But that's the difference between her and Jen. Bravo wants to distance themselves from someone who has done something like that. And Jen's behavior is very erratic. I mean, we could go on and on and on with the things that Jen Shah has done on video. Like literally been caught on video doing, screaming at people, degrading people. Like I just saw so many different things. And why does Heather have a black eye? On the latest episode of Housewives of Salt Lake City, Heather's got a black eye and she won't tell anybody what happened. She trying to cover for Jen because she knew Jen's case was coming up. I don't know. Listen, let me know what you think about this video in the comments below. What do you think about this sentencing guideline document that was released? 22-page document. Don't forget, I will put the link to that in the description below. Leave your comments about how long do you think Jen Shah is going to get? Do you believe her? Do you think that she just pled guilty because that was her last choice? Or do you think that this woman really did defraud all these people? I mean, come on now. We all know the truth, right? Are you watching The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City? Do you think the show is going to survive now that Jen is no longer going to be on the show anymore? What is the future of Housewives of Salt Lake City? We don't know. I would love to hear from you. Join the conversation. Chime in below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Subscribe so you can get up to date notifications when I post new content. Hit the thumbs up button right below this video to like the video so it gets shared out throughout the YouTube community. And I thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Damien After Dark. See ya.